the road into hollers, and wasn't on any map that Elias Shaw carried. He learned years ago that the best jobs never were. No GPS, no cell signal, just the crunch of gravel beneath his boots and the soft hush of pine boughs swaying like old men whispering. He was lean mid-40s, with a look of a man who'd walked away from something and hadn't stopped since. His jeans were frayed, jacket military issue, and everything he owned was in a canvas pack slung over one shoulder. A silver compass dangled from a leather cord around his neck, more sentimental than practical. It hadn't pointed true in years. At the bottom of the hollow, a gate waited. It was wrought iron, rusted black, and curled into thorny spirals. Beyond it lay an orchard, ancient and crooked. Apple trees lined the slope in uneven rows, their branches twisted like arthritic fingers, thick with fruit, blood-red, golden bruised, black as coal. Elias paused. It wasn't the sight of the apples that stopped him. It was the air, still and heavy, like the moment before thunder splits the sky. He turned to the figure waiting beside the gate, an old man in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. His skin was creased like tree bark, eyes pale as unripe fruit. "You Shaw?" the man asked without smiling. "That's me." "You come alone?" Elias nodded. "Was told you needed harvesters. Quiet work. Good pay." The old man studied him for a long beat, then opened the gate. It creaked like something waking up. "You got a knife?" Elias blinked. "For pruning." The old man didn't answer, just turned and started walking between the rows. Elias followed. The orchard was quiet, not bird quiet, not peaceful quiet, hollow quiet. Every step Elias took made the moss squish underfoot. The trees loomed close, trunks wide and gnarled. Some had bones caught in their roots, old ones, whitened by time. A jawbone, a length of femur, maybe a rib. He said nothing. The old man finally stopped beside a low, wide tree whose bark looked scorched in places. Its apples hung low, too heavy for the thin branches. The fruit pulsed slightly like they breathed. "Rule 1, the old man said, pointing with his stick. "Don't pick from the south end. That row doesn't forgive. Rule 2, don't drop a picked apple. They don't like bruising. And Rule 3, you do not eat what ain't offered." Elias didn't move. "They'll whisper," the old man said, voice low. "Every one of them. Some sweet, some cruel. Some promise things. Some lie. That's how you know the difference. The difference between who was and who still is." They harvested in silence. The old man gave Elias a cloth satchel and left him alone among the trees. The orchard stretched farther than it should have, sloping into a misty depth the sun never touched. Each apple was warm in his hand, too warm, and with each one he picked, he heard something, a murmur, a phrase, a sigh. At first he thought it was the wind, but it knew him. By sunset his sack was full. He walked back toward the cabin that stood at the edge of the orchard, set into a clearing where the wind dared blow again. The old man stood on the porch, lighting a pipe. Elias dropped the satchel on the steps. "Anything speak to you?" the old man asked. Elias hesitated. One apple, black as pitch, had whispered his name. "I heard something," he admitted. The old man nodded like that was expected. "You'll hear more tomorrow." "Is that a promise or warning?" The old man took a long drag, exhaled blue smoke. "Ain't it always both?" The sky over hollers and bruised to a deep violet by morning, veiled in a haze that clung like the aftertaste of smoke. Elias woke on a cot inside the cabin. The walls were paneled with old, knotted pine and covered in dried bundles of sage, garlic, and something else he couldn't identify. The smell was earthy, pungent, protective. The old man was gone, but breakfast waited on the small kitchen table. Grits, black coffee, and a single apple, perfectly round and pale gold. He didn't touch the apple. Instead, he stepped out onto the porch, the cold biting through his shirt. The orchard shimmered with dew that steamed as the sun broke through. Mist threaded between the rows like low tide between graves. He grabbed his satchel and went in. He worked in the western rows this time. These trees were taller, wider around. Some bore twisted carvings in the bark. Faces, crosses, names and languages Elias didn't recognize. As he moved down the row, he noticed markers at the base of the trees. Stones, cracked and half swallowed by moss. Each bore initials and dates. The orchard was the graveyard, and the apples were the headstones. He picked carefully, slow and deliberate, ignoring the whispers. They were louder today, urgent, needling. But one stopped him cold. A soft female voice. "Elias, please, it hurts." He turned. The voice had come from a low-hanging apple, blood-red and wet-looking. He stared at it. It pulsed once, like a heart. He shouldn't have. He knew he shouldn't have. But the voice... He plucked it gently, turning it in his hand. The skin was warm and slightly yielding, like overripe flesh. He brought it close, the voice whispering in fragments now, his name, a place, a song his mother used to hum. Then he bit. The juice that filled his mouth wasn't sweet. It was coppery, cold. It tasted like rust and old water. He dropped to one knee as the orchard spun around him. The vision hit like a sledgehammer. He stood in a sunlit room. A girl sat at a wooden table, hands bound, mouth bloody. A man, bald, grinning, humming, walked around her slowly with a hammer in hand. Elias tried to move, to scream. He couldn't. He was only watching. The man raised the hammer. The girl's mouth formed a single word, run. Then the hammer came down. Everything went black. Elias staggered back to his feet, nearly vomiting. The apple was gone, rotted into black sludge in his palm. He looked around. The trees were watching. He didn't know how he knew, but they were. And now something else knew he'd taken a bite. He returned to the cabin late, silent. The old man was there, rocking on the porch. "You bit one, didn't you?" Elias didn't answer. "Thought you might. Took me 4 days before I tried. You lasted 2. What was that?" Elias asked hoarsely. The old man looked out at the trees. That was a memory. "Whose?" The old man lit his pipe. "The one buried under that tree." Elias shuddered. "Why show me that?" "You picked it, took the offering. It was a murder." "They all are," the old man said. "This whole orchard grows on blood. Roots drinks in like water." He turned toward Elias, eyes pale and hard. "And now you carry it. What happens now?" The old man leaned forward, face shadowed. "You eat another, it'll take more." "Take what?" "Pieces," he said. "Of you." That night, Elias dreamed of the girl. Her eyes, her broken mouth, the way she mouthed run. And behind her, the grinning man turned, his face now blurred, bleeding into Elias's own. He woke gasping. From somewhere deep in the orchard, a branch snapped. Then another. Something was walking the rows. And it wasn't alone. By morning, the mist hadn't lifted. It had thickened. Elias stepped outside and paused. The orchard loomed like a painting left in the rain. Trees bent at odd angles, bark dripping, apples sagging like tumors. The air smelled wrong. Wet leather and spoiled meat. No bird song. No insects. Just the trees. Breathing. He didn't go in right away. Instead, he found the old man down by the root cellar, working silently. Elias crouched beside him, watching him sort through a crate of dried herbs, glass jars, and something in a pouch that smelled like bone dust. "You keep records?" Elias asked. The old man glanced up. "I don't write nothing down." "Then how do you know which tree holds which soul?" "I don't." Elias stared. "I don't need to," the old man continued. "The orchard does." He pointed a gnarled finger toward the misty trees. "They remember, better than we do, and when it's time, they call the right one." He worked the northern rows that day, where the trees were blackened and barkless. The fruit here was sparse, half-formed, some still had veins, or things that looked like eyelids under their skins. He ignored them all, until he came to the tree with the wire fence wrapped around its trunk. There was a sign nailed to it, rotted and unreadable. A single apple hung from the lowest branch, bloated and yellowed, almost translucent. It looked like it was sweating. He turned away. but his fingers had already brushed it. He didn't bite this time. Not yet. He tucked the apple in his satchel and walked quickly back to the cabin. Night fell like tar. The cabin creaked with the weight of silence. The old man was gone. No sign of struggle. Just a still warm pipe resting on the table, and muddy boot prints leading back out into the orchard. Elias called his name. No answer. He lit a lantern, grabbed the old man's hatchet, and followed the trail. The mist swallowed him whole. He walked for what felt like hours. The path no longer made sense. The rows curved in on themselves. Some trees he passed 3 times. Others moved while he wasn't looking. At last, the trail ended at a clearing. In its center stood a figure. The old man, or what had been the old man. He was wrapped in bark, his arms stiffened into branches, eyes open but full of moss. The orchard had taken him, and beside him, the keeper. It stepped forward from the trees, 10 feet tall, hunched with limbs like scaffolding. Its skin was bark. Its face was a smooth oval of white, featureless save for a vertical slit, like a mouth stitched shut. The trees bent toward it. It tilted its head at Elias, and something bloomed in his mind. A question, a demand. It wanted the apple. Elias dropped the satchel. The yellow apple rolled out. It pulsed once. The keeper reached forward with a hand like a splintered root. Elias hesitated. Then he did the only thing that made sense. He bit it. This vision was worse. He stood at the bottom of a well. Looking up, someone laughed above him. Then water poured down. Not clean water, but thick, dark, warm. The taste of copper. Panic. He drowned. He remembered drowning. Not metaphorically. Not a dream. The soul in this apple had been buried alive, in water, and it had wanted company. When Elias woke, he was on his knees, covered in mud and sweat. The keeper gone, but not entirely. Its mark was on him now, carved faintly into his forearm like a burn. The trees were quieter, sated. For now, he didn't go back to the cabin. He found a shovel and began digging under one of the older trees. He wasn't sure why. He just knew. What he found was worse than bones. It was a jawbone, still attached to a face. His face, half rotted, grinning. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat on the floorboards with his back to the cold iron stove, staring at the apple core. It hadn't browned. It sat on the table where he'd left it, glistening, golden, and watching in a way only the orchard understood. At some point, the whispering began again. Not outside, inside. Words like root systems curling in his thoughts. Not voices he recognized, but memories, not his, not entirely. Each one tinged with pain, with debt. The orchard wasn't a burial ground. It was a ledger, and every tree was an entry. He left the cabin before dawn, not even pausing to grab his coat. His breath fogged the air. The orchard was brighter than usual, mist glowing with pale, unnatural light. Dew clung to every branch. The apples looked heavier today. He passed the old man's cabin, now still and dark, and moved toward the southern grove, uncharted roads he hadn't worked yet. Every step brought a kind of pressure, not physical, mental, like wading deeper into a body of water, like stepping across some unseen threshold. The trees here weren't dead, but alive in a different way, bark glossy and pulsating slightly, as if full of blood. Their roots buckled the earth in thick ridges like knotted veins, and the apples, some bore human features beneath the skin. He heard a voice. Hi, feminine. He spun. No one, but the air shimmered, and he smelled perfume, rose water and old iron. The next apple he picked was pale pink, almost beautiful. He didn't want to bite it. He had to. He was back in a small wood-paneled bedroom. A girl, young, no older than 17, screamed as the door locked behind her. The man who entered didn't smile. He said nothing. The girl cried, begged. She was smothered with a pillow. The last thing she saw was a carved headboard above her, a flower pattern. Elias screamed, but only in his mind. And when he came back to the orchard, he vomited into the roots. He stumbled between the trees, clutching his stomach. This wasn't a punishment for the dead. It was a punishment for the living. The orchard didn't just store memories. It made you bear them, like interest on a debt you never signed for. He sat at the base of a gnarled tree. Beneath its trunk was a small wooden marker, almost invisible beneath Moss P.D. Haskell, 1903 to 1941. There was no apple, just a bark, smooth and gray. Elias placed his hand on it and flinched. A heartbeat, not his. Some folks never got buried in soil, said a voice behind him. He turned fast. An old woman stood there, stringy gray hair, barefoot, dress torn and stained like she crawled out of a well. She wasn't dead. She wasn't alive. Who are you? Elias whispered. She tilted her head. You bit more than you should have. He took a step back. She didn't follow. You're not from here. That's why the orchard don't know what to do with you. He reached for the hatchet. She laughed, a dry, broken sound. You think you're the first? She rasped. Folks come, folks go. Orchard keeps what it wants. Then what does it want from me? She looked at him with those empty eyes. You already gave it. Didn't you feel it? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment he did feel it. Something missing. A part of him left behind in the pulp of that golden apple. A sliver of his mind, his will. And now the orchard had its teeth in him. The woman vanished when he blinked. In her place, a small tree had grown. It hadn't been there before. It held one apple. Red. Familiar. He didn't want to touch it, but he already had. It was in his hand. It was in his mouth. This time, there was no vision, only sensation. Falling into wet dirt, roots clawing into his skin, something digging at his eyes, the taste of iron and earth. When he came to, the tree was taller. His name was on a marker, freshly carved. Elias Shaw, 1985? No death date, just a dash, just a waiting. It was dusk again, or maybe morning. Elias couldn't tell anymore. The trees had rearranged themselves. The grove no longer curved gently along the hillside. Now it spiraled, inward, downward, toward a hollow he hadn't seen before, or perhaps hadn't been allowed to see. The mist clung low to ground like a second skin, and every breath he took carried the taste of overripe fruit and spoiled blood. His legs moved without decision. He was following the pull. When he reached the center, the world felt quieter, dead quiet. The trees here were unlike the others, not just older, but larger, bark like weathered flesh, deep cracks that bled sap as dark as oil. Their branches didn't move in the wind. They listened, and every apple that grew from them was black, not purple, not red, black as coal, black as night, black as memory. They pulsed faintly with light from within, like hearts. At the base of the central tree, easily 20 feet thick, was a wide, rotted stump, a chopping block, and an axe. Elias heard footsteps behind him. He turned, slowly, expecting the old woman again. Instead, he saw a man, younger than himself, wearing old canvas overalls and a blood-stained undershirt. His eyes were gone, sockets weeping sap. I harvested too much, the man said, voice a choking rasp. Ate the wrong apple. What happens if I leave? Elias asked. The man only smiled, revealing rows of teeth that fused into a smooth, bark-like ridge. You don't, he said. Elias backed away, heart pounding. The trees groaned, low, mournful, ancient. From behind the trunks, others stepped out. People, dozens of them, all marked, some with mouths sewn shut, others missing fingers. One was just a shadow with bones flickering inside like candlelight. Each held an apple. Each stepped forward. Elias grabbed the axe. The orchard reacted. The trees shuddered. Bark split with a sound of screams. Roots curled and hissed, threading through the grass toward his boots. The axe was heavy, but familiar. He swung wildly at the nearest root, and it recoiled, spraying dark sap. A shriek rose from the orchard, not human, not plant. Something in between. Something watching. Something that counted. He ran, past the ghostly harvesters, past the gnarled trees, back to the orchard that now folded endlessly inward. The more he ran, the more the rows multiplied. Every path led to another tree. Every tree bore a different face, faces of the dead, faces he'd seen in the visions. One tree had the girl with the headboard. Another bore the old man snarl. One even looked like himself. And as he passed it, the apple on its branch turned to face him, just slightly, as if in recognition, as if in approval. He dropped the axe, collapsed in the dirt. He screamed, but his voice no longer echoed. The orchard had eaten that too. When he opened his eyes, the trees were gone. No orchard, just a field, golden with long, dry grass. A single wooden sign stood where the gate had been, barely legible beneath moss and rot. Caution, do not trespass. Unstable ground. Elias stood slowly. The axe was gone. The blood on his hands was not. He walked toward the road. A car passed, not stopping. Then another. Then nothing. He looked back. No orchard. No trees. But in his pocket, something shifted. He reached in and pulled out a black apple. Warm. Still beating. 1 month later. The old foreman stared at the new hand across the table. A fresh face. Polite. Strong grip. You worked orchard before? The man nodded. I know the rhythm, he said. I know how not to waste. The foreman narrowed his eyes. You sure you can handle this place? It's not like the others. The man smiled, a tight, slow smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'll manage, he said. I've already been down to the roots. Outside, the trees rustled. Their branches stretched in anticipation, and in the soft, loamy earth beneath, something shifted, slow and satisfied. The orchard keeps its own, always,